Avignon, the Avignon papacy. You maybe read about it in high school in your history book, maybe a paragraph or two, but it's an intensely relevant moment in the 14th century that has implications to even modern world politics. Go back to the Vatican in the early years of the 1300s when Pope Boniface VIII is sitting on his papal throne in the Vatican, and he makes a decision. He decides that he actually wants to control all of the kingdoms and the kings throughout Europe. So he had the papal states, and he was actually the civil authority over the papal states. But what he really wanted to do was bring all of the countries of Europe and the kingdoms underneath his papal civil authority, not just ecclesiological, church authority. So he passes this edict where he declares himself to be above all of the kings. Now this is not going to go over well, as you can imagine. Henry VIII is going to do the reverse of this as a civil authority in the 16th century, 1534, in the Act of Supremacy. He's going to make himself the head of the church. Well, what Boniface was doing was really the reverse of that. He's the head of the church in Roman Catholic theology, and he's going to try to make himself the head of all the kingdoms. It's not going to go well. Philip, King of Spain, decides that he's actually going to send over some of his French commandos, as it were, 14th century French commandos, to go over there and to seize as prisoner the Pope, and to bring him in chains here to Avignon. You see the Avignon papal palace behind me. And he's going to hold him here just to make the point that he's actually in charge in France, and that the Pope is not going to be over the civil authority in France. Well, Pope Boniface was old, he wasn't well, and they finally released him. He goes back to the Vatican and he dies, which begins then a scramble for who's going to be the next Pope. And the French king, Philip, decides that he's going to take his cardinals, and of course the cardinals are going to do what the king says if they want to live, and they're going to nominate for Pope a French Pope who's going to sit here in Avignon, the Avignon papacy. It's going to begin what's another one of those great schisms in the church called the Avignon papacy, or the Babylonian captivity of the church, if you are an Italian and you are a pro-Italian pope. So you've got cardinals throughout Europe electing and siding and allying with a pope that sits in Rome at the Vatican and a pope that sits here in France, in Avignon. Obviously, this is going to have great implications for the life of John Wycliffe. John Wycliffe is going to be protected in part and die of natural causes. He's going to die after 60 years of life in 1384, during which time he has the protection of Edward III, Richard II, following him, kings of England, as well as John of Gaunt, the most powerful nobleman in England. Why? Because the church is in such shambles. What about this papal authority and this pure line of succession from Peter for popes, when you have two popes and at one point you actually have four popes, all claiming to be the pure line from Peter and to have the keys? And what does that look like? Well, it looks like a mess to people. This is a key and important pre-Reformation moment that sets the world up to scratch their head and say, I'm not sure that we can trust the Pope. Which Pope is actually the authority? Which Pope is actually the head of the church? Which Pope can give us forgiveness of sins? Which Pope has the keys to heaven and the keys to hell? And which one do we be loyal to? Because if we're loyal to the one in France, here in Avignon, then the Pope in the Vatican in Rome is going to declare us anathema and damned. So this is so important to Wycliffe's pre-Reformation, the morning star of the Reformation in England. It's also very important to what's happening in Prague. Oh, they're clapping for me. Listen to that. What's happening in Prague? In Prague, you have John Huss. And why are there so many followers, so many people curious and wanting to know about justification by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone? Well, it's in part because of this political mess started by a greedy pope who wanted to do a power grab and be in control, civil control, over all of Europe. We end up here in Avignon. This would be a center for persecution against the Huguenots in the 16th century, in the 1560s, just north of here, along the Côte du Rhône, the Rhône River, the beautiful wine country here. You have Châteauneuf-du-Pape and the new castle of the Pope there, which now is in ruins, would be the garrison for troops that would go in and sack Orange. Again, just a few miles north of here, up the Côte du Rhône, where the Huguenots were so strong that the bishop of the 12th century cathedral there in Orange would actually just pack up and leave. There wasn't anybody to minister to for that bishop, because the Temple, the Huguenot church, was gathering there, singing the psalms in the vernacular, preaching the word, lectio continuo, the gospel of grace, the 5 solas, justification by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone, prevailed in this area, but was then crushed by horrific effects of the multinational mercenary troops of the Holy Roman Emperor in collusion with the kings of France to crush the Huguenots.